chapter 22. And Jesus answered and spake again in parables unto them, saying, The kingdom of heaven is likened unto a certain king, who made a marriage feast for his son, and sent forth his servants to call them that were bidden to the marriage feast, and they would not come. Again he sent forth other servants, saying, Tell them that are bidden, Behold, I have made ready my dinner. My oxen, my fatlings are killed, and all things are ready. Come to the marriage feast. But they made light of it and went their ways, one to his own farm, another to his merchandise, and the rest laid hold on his servants, and treated them shamefully, and killed them.
So the kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who made a marriage feast for his son. And he invited people to the feast, but the people who were invited didn't come, and they were even ugly about it, and even mistreated the servants and killed them. And Jesus, speaking in parables, as we learned earlier in Matthew, says Jesus didn't speak to the multitudes except in parables. He only spoke in parables to them, because to some it was given to know the mysteries, but to other it was not. That's why he spoke in parables, because those who were not chosen, he was fine for them to not understand the truth.
But the king was wroth, and he sent his armies and destroyed those murderers and burned their city.
And so that is a direct reference to the burning of Jerusalem. The city is Jerusalem. The Jewish city is Jerusalem. And the people who were initially invited to the wedding were the Jews. They were the Jews were the first to be given special place for God, but they rejected their calling or invitation. Therefore, the king is going to destroy the murderers, which are the Jews, and burn the city, which is Jerusalem.
Then saith he to his servants, The wedding is ready, but they that were bidden were not worthy. Go ye therefore unto the partings of the highways, and as many as ye shall find, bid to the marriage feast. And those...
So he says that the Jews were not worthy. Now, I don't think anybody is worthy, and so I think what happens, he didn't go out and find new people who are worthy, even though the Jews were not worthy. What he does is, since the invitation was given to a select group of people, and since they failed, then the mission, the second follow-up mission, no longer is seeking people who are worthy, but just invites everybody.
Those servants went out into the highways and gathered together all as many as they found, both bad and good.
Both bad and good. So now he's not looking for worthy people anymore. He's just looking for anybody.
And the wedding was filled with guests. But when the king came in to behold the guests, he saw there a man who had not on a wedding garment. And he saith unto him, Friend, how camest thou in hither not having a wedding garment? And he was speechless. Then the king said to the servants, Bind him hand and foot, and cast him into the outer darkness. There shall be the weeping and the gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few chosen.
Now this is interesting. So even though he invited both good and bad to the feast, he was not looking for people who were worthy. He still excludes some. It says, For many are called, but few are chosen. So then the debate would open up is, how does he choose? Does he choose based on merit, or does he choose based on his own discretion? And I would side with that he chooses with his own discretion, and it's perfectly fair and right and acceptable for him to do that. Just like we talked about the parable of the people working in the field and getting the same pay all day, even though some worked longer than others. He says, is it not mine? Was this money not mine to do with whatever I chose? You agreed to get 1 denarius a day, and I didn't do you any harm. And if I chose to be merciful to this person, it's perfectly right for me to do so. So, he chooses some and not others based on his own discretion. And anything he chooses is grace. Anything he doesn't choose is what we all deserve, because we're all unworthy.
Then went the Pharisees and took counsel how they might ensnare him in his talk. And they sent to him their disciples with the Herodians, saying, Teacher, we know that thou art true, and teach us the way of God in truth, and carest not for any one, for thou regardest not the person of men.
So the Pharisees here are trying to ensnare Jesus. So they plan a trap. And they come to him with flattering words as if that would accomplish something. When Jesus knows their heart and knows what they're doing. He says, and we know that thou carest not for anyone. Now, what they're saying there is that you have no special regard for anybody, even if they're in high positions of authority.
Tell us, therefore, what thinkest thou? Is it lawful to give tribute unto Caesar or not?
So since they considered that Jesus didn't give any people any special respect simply due to their position. Now, I think Jesus certainly did give people respect due to their position, but their perspective was that he was harsh towards leaders and those in high authority, simply because he was harsh against the leaders of the Jews.
But Jesus perceived their wickedness and said, Why make ye...
So Jesus knew their heart. Jesus knows your mind and heart all the time.
Ye trial of me, ye hypocrites, show me the tribute money. And they brought unto him a denarius. And he saith unto them, Whose is this image and superscription? They say unto him, Caesar's. Then saith he unto them, Render therefore unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. And when they heard it, they marveled and left him and went away.
So Jesus said, since Caesar's face is on the coin, you need to give Caesar the coins. Pay your taxes. Oh, now, he didn't regard Caesar as any superhuman or God like a lot of people did. He was just a regular human, but he was in a position of authority over secular government and worldly governments. And Jesus says you have to comply with the worldly governments. And the coin belongs to him, you give it back to him. Whatever he says, you do. And they didn't stump him. I guess they planned to trick him because they thought that he would say, no, you don't have to pay your taxes. But he said, sure, pay your taxes.
On that day there came to him Sadducees, they that say that there is no resurrection. And they asked him, saying, Teacher, Moses said, If a man die having no children, his brother shall marry his wife.
So the Sadducees, I remember this they're sad because they didn't believe in a resurrection. So I guess the only thing that they thought was whatever you live, whatever happens in your lifetime, whatever experiences you have now, that's all there is. Because when you die, it's all over. There is no life after death. It's all about the here and now. And that's why when they would read about the promised Messiah and King of the Jews, they would simply think about an earthly kingdom, and that's it. They would not think about a spiritual kingdom and life after death.
Wife, and raise up seed unto his brother. Now there were with us 7 brethren, and the first married and deceased, and having no seed left his wife unto his brother. In like manner the second also, and the third unto the 7th. And after them all the woman died. In the resurrection therefore, whose wife shall she be of the 7? For they all had her. But Jesus answered and said unto them, Ye do err, not knowing the Scriptures, nor the power of God. For in the resurrection they neither marry, nor are given in marriage, but are as angels in heaven.
So Jesus gives us some real insight into life after death and what it's like in heaven. So they're worried about, first of all, they're asking a question they don't even believe in. They don't believe in resurrection or life after death. They're just trying to trip him up. But he says, for in the resurrection, I think that would mean after you die, you will be resurrected, and you will no longer be married or given in marriage, but you'll be like the angels, which are, I guess they don't reproduce. They are just created beings, and they don't reproduce. They don't have spouses.
But as touching the resurrection of the dead, have ye not read that which was spoken unto you by God, saying, I am the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob? God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. And when the
Now here, Jesus says that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob have already been resurrected. And this is before Jesus' death. I know I've heard some preterist, which I kind of consider myself a preterist. But I've heard one guy say that the resurrection, it's hard to understand what he actually believes, but I don't know what you would do with the fact that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had been resurrected before the destruction of Jerusalem and before the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. So I think that would indicate that the resurrection happens for each individual person immediately after you die. There is no waiting period. There is no, sleep until a certain event takes place on earth. But after you die physically, the resurrection is a spiritual resurrection, and it happens all throughout time, because Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are still alive at this moment when Jesus is speaking, because God is the God of the living, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
When the multitudes heard it, they were astonished at his teaching. But the Pharisees, when they heard that he had put the Sadducees to silence, gathered themselves together. And one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question, trying him, Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? And he said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the great and first commandment. And a second like unto it is this, Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments the whole law hangeth, and the prophets.
So the Pharisees, the chief priests, the scribes, elders, and Sadducees are all coming at Jesus, thinking that they have a question that will stump Jesus or trip him up or cause him to say something ridiculous. And they all fail. I don't really know what the Pharisees were looking for here about the greatest law, which is the great commandment. So they must have thought they knew what the great commandment was. And I don't know which one they would consider. Maybe keeping the Sabbath day or something. I don't know. But Jesus essentially lumps all 10 commandments into two. I think the first 3 commandments are regarding our relationship with God. You love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And all the other 7 are associated with how we treat our neighbor. You love your neighbor by not killing them and coveting their things and stuff like that. Not lying, bearing false witness. So he lumps the whole law and prophets into those 2 things. It's the great commandment is love God, because if you love God, then you'll obey him. And the second one, like it. If you love your neighbor, then that also demonstrates that you love God, because you love his creation and you set your selfish desires aside and consider other people.
Now while the Pharisees were gathered together, Jesus asked them a question, saying, What think ye of the Christ? Whose son is he? They say unto him, The son of David.
So Jesus asked them specifically, who do you think this Messiah is that you all know about through prophecies, and you're all expecting and waiting to come? They were looking for a Messiah, but they were just looking for a earthly king Messiah, one who would make the Jewish nation the envy of the world from a physical perspective. And he says, who is this Christ, the Messiah? And they didn't say, well, we don't know who a Messiah is. They knew who the Messiah was. They knew that, well, they didn't know who it was, but they knew that one was coming, and it would be the son of David.
He saith unto them, How then doth David in the Spirit call him Lord, saying, The Lord said unto my Lord, Sit thou on my right hand, till I put thine enemies underneath thy feet. If David then calleth him Lord, how is he his son? And no one was able to answer him a word, neither durst any man from that day forth ask him any more questions.
So, I guess after this barrage of attempts at tripping Jesus up, and he just shuts every one of them up one after the other. It sounds like they got the picture that they needed to stop trying to trip him up. So, because he embarrassed them with his questions. He says, who's the Messiah? They say, son of David. As if it's a physical son only. But Jesus points out that not only was the Messiah going to be the physical descendant of David, but he would be the Lord of David. So he's not just a normal descendant, not a physical king in the order of David from a physical, earthly standpoint, but he would be superior to David, and not only physical. It would be a spiritual kingdom where he had priority or authority over David. So that's chapter 22, and I'd appreciate your comments, and we will continue our Bible study.